Good evening, everyone. Got a happy crowd tonight. I would now like to call the May 2nd, 2023 Longmont City Council Study Session to order. The meeting is being live streamed at the city's YouTube channel, also at longmontpublicmedia.org/watch, also on the Comcast channels 8 or 880. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Peck,
Present.
Councilmember Hidalgo Faring. Here. Councilmember Martin. Present. Councilmember McCoy. Present. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Here. Councilmember Waters. Here. Councilmember Yarbrough. Here. You have a quorum, Mayor.
Thank you. Let's stand for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
For the public, anyone wishing to speak at first call public invited to be heard will need to add his or her name to the list outside the council chambers. Only those on the list will be invited to speak at the first public invited to be heard. Each speaker is limited to 3 minutes, and we need your name and address. We have motions to, do we have any motions to direct the city manager to add agenda items to another meeting from councilors? Seeing none, the next thing on our agenda is public invited to be heard. However, I'm going to augment the agenda to read a proclamation as I see many of the board members in the chamber. So this is a proclamation designating May 7th through the 13th, 2023 as Public Service Recognition Week, recognizing advisory board members in Longmont, Colorado. Whereas public servants include teachers, doctors, scientists, government employees, nurses, safety inspectors, laborers, computer technicians, social workers, and countless other occupations. And whereas every year the first week of May is dedicated to recognizing these dedicated public servants, and whereas this year the City of Longmont wishes to recognize the almost 200 volunteer advisory board members during Public Service Recognition Week for their dedication to public service. And whereas advisory board members fulfill the important function of advising and providing recommendations on policies, regulations, and operations to the City Council. And whereas advisory board members dedicate numerous hours of their own time each month to help ensure this community is a wonderful place to live in, to work in, and to play in. Now therefore, I, Joan Peck, Mayor, by virtue of the authority vested in me and the City Council of the City of Longmont, do hereby proclaim May 7th through the 13th, 2023 as Public Service Recognition Week in Longmont, and urge all residents to recognize and acknowledge our hard-working city employees and our volunteer advisory board members for their dedication and service to our community. So whenever you see a board member, thank them for the service that they do. They're kind of a behind the scenes, don't get a lot of recognition, so I want to thank them for everything they do. We did have a picture taken in the foyer, so usually we have a picture taken in front of the council. Do you still want that, or shall we? I think we're going to go with the one done in the foyer. Thank you for everything. So the next thing on our agenda is public invited to be heard. 3 minutes, and please state your name and address. The first person on our list is Luke Judson. Oh, and I do want to say, as I look at this list, that these are students from the CCAP project at the Silver Creek High School. Luke, can you have the microphone turned on, please? we go.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Luke Jacobson, and my address is 4901 Nelson Road, Longmont, Colorado. I'm here with some of my Silver Creek Leadership Academy classmates to share with you our capstone projects. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes when I was 3 years old. Being diagnosed at such a young age held me back because I lost a large majority of my speech between the ages of 3 and 4, which therefore made me struggle in the school. Luckily, I received a lot of help from the St. Vrain Valley School District speech pathology, occupational therapy, and special education support. 14 years on, diabetes is the biggest part of my life. For my capstone, I wanted to combine the two biggest parts of my life together: diabetes and soccer. I applied for an internship with the Colorado Soccer Foundation, who hosts camps for children with type 1 diabetes. When I was little, camps like these helped me realize that I wasn't alone in my fight, and it provided me with lifelong friends. It was at these camps when I was little where I met my mentor for my project, Miss Emily Fay. Miss Fay is the director of programming at the Colorado Soccer Foundation, and she helped me with insight and anything I needed for my capstone project. My role in the Colorado Soccer Foundation was creating a schedule, setting up games, and raising money for their winter and summer type 1 diabetes camps. I filled our schedule with games, crafts, snack time, all to help build relationships with other attendees. Games were created to help kids learn about their group and learn how they live with their disease, as well as providing a fun way to learn about soccer. Ms. Fay asked that I raise money for kids with scholarships who couldn't afford to go but wanted to. I set up a fundraising event at my school during World Diabetes Week, and by the end of the week, I had raised over $1,000, which in some way helped 33% of the camp attendees attend the camp. I can never pay back all the people that helped me with the struggle of living with type 1 diabetes. However, I tried my best to make their lives better. I will be taking with me what I've learned for my capstone project to the University of Colorado Boulder. Before that, though, there will be one final camp from June 7th through the 9th. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Luke. Olivia Weiskup.
Hello, City Council. My name is Olivia Weiskup. My address is 4901 Nelson Road, Longmont, Colorado. My capstone project is Senior Sentiments, and I'm partnering with Oliver Lang. Together, we are capturing the memories and wisdom of older adults through film and writing. Ollie and I are both passionate about creating connections and understand that older adults have a lot of knowledge that us younger kids should tap into. Last summer, my grandma was diagnosed with dementia, and as it continued to get worse, I realized that I should start to write down some of the stories she had while she was still cognitive. As it was sad to see the stories become harder to remember, I enjoyed this bonding experience I could have with her. I've always also enjoyed talking to people after fellowship during church services, and I've created many great friendships with older adults in my church community. So when it came time to figure out my capstone project, I knew immediately I was going to try and capture the stories and memories of older adults. So far, Ollie and I have filmed and transcribed 4 people's stories. In total, we've collected and recorded 6. Do keep in mind it takes a while to edit and transcribe each of these interviews. A name to recognize in one of these interviews was Leona Stacker, the first female mayor of Longmont. Her effervescent personality and backstory on how she became mayor was one of my favorites to transcribe. Another favorite interviewee of mine was Ollie's grandfather, Roger Lang, who was also mayor for a term and served on the city council for 8 years. In between interviewing people, I was able to visit the Beatrice Hover Assisted Living Center with another SCLA capstone project called Put a Smile on a Senior, run by Leonie Richardson and Sadie Shipman. I managed to make great connections and conversation with the people living there, and I remember hearing a funny story about how you could have an entire date night with only $10. Some goals we have accomplished this semester were finally figuring out a better format for our website where you can see both videos and the transcriptions. This had been a roadblock for a while since the program we were using before was incredibly finicky. Ollie and I also managed to use 2 different social media platforms for this project, those being Instagram and Facebook, which have been rather fun. Most recently, I made flyers with a QR code and a link to a Google form where I hope to hear back from some older adults and their responses on advice they'd give to the younger generation or quick stories they have from their youth that would provide a way to wrap up the project. One of my most recent responses kind of pulled at my heart, and I think it encompasses what Senior Sentiments is trying to do. The response in short goes, I wish someone, when I was young, had made me believe that I was good enough. There's something about youth that leads you to believe we're not enough, and that's so unfortunate. Please believe me when I say you truly are enough. You can't strive for excellence unless you believe in your potential, and it's far greater than you can possibly imagine. It's messages like this one that make stories so unique because no two human experiences are the same, but through sharing and making connections is how we create significance in our bonds to one another. This makes me forever grateful that I can capture the memories and wisdom of older adults. I hope to continue my education at Purdue University next year studying elementary education and business and marketing. Thank you.
Thank you, Olivia. Ollie Lang.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Ollie Lang. I live on 4901 Nelson Road. And as Olivia said, I'm working with her in my capstone project. We record the stories of older adults and share them through YouTube and also our blog on our website. And she covered the bulk of it, but my part of the project is videoing these interviews and conducting them with the senior citizens. And we take the film and then I edit them. And it's been a lot of fun doing it, and I've had a lot of fun learning all the knowledge that the older adults have to offer. And I ask them about their lives and what they've done and a piece of advice that they can share to the younger generation. And I do this because of my grandma, who has Alzheimer's, and I thought it'd be a good idea to just encompass those stories and share them with everybody, so then maybe their grandkids can always remember them. And you can find our YouTube channel at senior_sentiments. And next year, I plan to continue my education at CU studying marketing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ollie. Grace Lacrosse.
Hello, City Council members. My name is Grace Lacrosse. My address is 4901 Nelson Road, Longmont, Colorado. My capstone project is Silver Creek Unites, also known as Unified Sports or Special Olympics. Silver Creek Unites is a student-coached sports program for students with disabilities. This project started last year, and my partner Allura and I took it over. I have a love of sports, being a multi-sport athlete myself, and I really wanted to focus on making a difference around our school. Our mission is to spread awareness of this program, make our school a more inclusive environment, and to make sure every student has the same opportunities. For this project, we created teams of athletes and student mentors to create connections throughout the school year to compete against other schools in our district and around the state. We coached 2 sports, bowling in the fall and basketball in the winter. During bowling, we put together a bowling match where our athletes played with the Longmont Police Department and Longmont Fire Department. Our biggest accomplishment was winning 1st place at regionals and 4th place in state. After bowling, we made a team for basketball season. Our team participated in practices, tournaments, and games. We finished with 8 wins and 2 losses, scoring 100 points in 1 game. We again held a game against the Longmont Police Department, as well as a Silver Creek Staff vs. Student game, which was watched by our whole school. We also held banquets for both sports with food, awards, and handmade trophies. This project has helped our athletes meet new people, build relationships with many different students, and give them an outside-of-school activity. Seeing the smiling faces on the court and at matches, as well as truly grateful parents, just showed me how much of an impact we had made. And I can honestly say that this project had changed my life and hopefully the ones of our athletes and mentors as well. I'm excited to take all the experiences from this year with me to CU Boulder in the fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Alexa?
Hello, City Council members. My name is Alexa Gore, and my address is 4901 Nelson Road. 64% of women in the world could not afford to purchase period products during the last year. 21% of these faced difficulties on a regular basis. This statistic is shocking, especially since menstruation is something that happens to the majority of women in our world, making it crucial that we support them. I have taken on the For the Girls project this year. If you haven't heard of this project before, it focuses on ways to gather and supply women in our community with these materials. Through donation drives, fundraisers, and education about women's health, I have worked to make a difference in the lives of these women so they only have to focus on taking care of themselves, not how they are going to do it financially. Over the course of this year, I've held 3 large donation drives. The first donation drive was at the Unified Sports Games, bringing in around 50 donations from the parents of the students participating in the games. The second was at the rival basketball game between Silver Creek and Longmont High School. By making this drive a competition between schools, I was able to bring in over 300 donations alone in this drive. The last was an online drive through an Amazon wish list I set up, and we were able to bring in around 100 donations. I have dropped off more than 400 donations over the course of this year, and I hope that this project will only grow, considering that this was the first year that it has been done. All of the donations I received this year went to the I Support the Girls organization up in Fort Collins, where I will also be attending Fort Collins University, Colorado State, and to study business. With your help, I hope changing the statistic that was previously mentioned, even if it's only in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Alexa. Connor? I think it's Zarby.
Good evening, City Council members. My name is Connor Zerby, and my address is 4901 Nelson Road, Longmont, Colorado.
Connor, would you mind just tilting that microphone up a little? You're tall and I need to hear you.
Should I start over?
No,
Okay.
you're good.
Okay. My capstone project is called Animal Articles, and working together with my mentor, Macy May from Longmont Leaders, my goal is to spread awareness about rescue animals and organizations related to them. This passion started a few years ago when I started to volunteer at the Longmont Humane Society because I needed volunteer animal hours and I loved animals. Since my family has always had 1 or more dogs in their care, I figured joining the Humane Society would be an awesome opportunity. This then blossomed into my capstone project as I've seen animals that go through the system and the difference that it makes. So many animals are being put down in shelters across the country because they don't have the capacity to hold them or the people to help the animals become house trained. My focus was to write articles about animals that have gone through the system, how they changed, and where they are now. My first project was focused on the Longmont Humane Society, as I had volunteered there for so long, and asked my volunteer coordinator to help me out. She directed me to Miss Wood, and we got talking about this. I was able to interview her about the process that they go through and talk about a potential dog named Lemon, who had recently got adopted. We reached out to her owners asking for pictures and a short blurb about how she was doing, but sadly we didn't get a reply. We reached out again a week later, but still nothing. We talked again, and sadly she couldn't think of any other good examples that she felt were special, and so the article sadly fell through. It was sad, but I persevered and reached out to 5 other organizations hoping for another article, but none of them responded. It's from that point on that, with the help of our wonderful Miss Adams, we decided to pivot my project, and instead of focusing on the organizations, we focused on the animals. We sent out a form for people to fill out, and I reached out to people I know who have rescue animals. This worked great as people replied, and I was able to start posting mini articles on social media. It was great to be able to read and write about people's experience with their rescue animals. My hope is that while I didn't have as much of an impact as I would have liked, people will still be able to find these and remember that adopting an animal is just as good or better than going to a breeder. Next year I plan on going to University of Victoria in Canada for school, and while I won't be able to continue my project here in the States, maybe I can make a difference up there as well. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you, Liam. Liam Paul?
Hello, City Council members. My name is Liam Paul, and my address is 4901 Longmont, Colorado. My senior capstone project involved partnering with Operation Paperback, a national nonprofit organization that aims to collect and send gently used books to active or retired members of the United States military. Reading has always been a passion of mine, and books have provided solace whenever I was going through tough times. So when I learned about Operation Paperback and its efforts to help military members, I knew that it was the perfect choice for my senior capstone project. To accomplish my project goal, I divided it into 2 phases. The first phase focused on collecting as many books as possible. I collected most of my books through my book donation bins, where members of the community could drop off book donations. If you walked into Q's Espresso anytime during the winter, you probably saw my box as you stepped inside. I was also a part of a drive and drop event early on in the school year. In total, I was able to collect over 600 books. Now, unfortunately, 300 of these books did not meet the shipping requirements for Operation Paperback, and following the collection phase, I concentrated on organizing and shipping the books I had collected. To get the books sorted, I organized several book sorting events where I had 3 to 4 volunteers help me sort the books by genre, which helped quicken up the pace for shipping them. So far, I've sent approximately 250 books to over 20 military members, and I plan on sending the other 50 before the school year ends. Regarding the books that I couldn't send, I plan to donate them to the Longmont Public Library and put a few of them in the little free libraries around town. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you. I'm proud of my work and look forward to continuing my efforts to support our military members at the University of Arizona next fall. Thank you.
Thank you, Liam. Josh?
Hello, City Council. My name is Josh Lurie, and my address is 4901 Nelson Road, Longmont, Colorado. I am a part of SCLA, and my joint capstone project with Isaiah Bennett, Movement for Memory, aims to create a learning environment that combines movement with learning. I came up with the idea for this project last year as an 11th grader and implemented it as a mini capstone with a first grade class at Eagle Crest Elementary School. Following the COVID year of online learning, I grew sick of education on iPads with a lack of time set aside for movement. And after speaking with a lot of my classmates, they hated it just as much as I did. I wanted to find a way to combine learning with movement and realized even if my classes weren't set up this way, I could create this ideal experience for others. This project couldn't have become a reality without the amazing teachers Mrs. Doyle and Mr. Gassetta at Eagle Crest Elementary, who welcomed this new learning tactic with open arms, as they too realized the potential of this project. Not only do the students have more fun when moving around, but it is also extremely beneficial to their cognition. I've done some research to find out how moving helps our brains and found an article by QWERTYkids.com that states, physical movement helps the brain form neural pathways, which increases cognition, improves memory, and helps us to acquire knowledge faster. We have taken this valuable piece of information and used it as the basis for our why, as in this is the reason we're providing this opportunity to the young students of Eagle Crest. Movement is a crucial piece of learning, and it is something that is overlooked every day by teachers and administration, which is why I've become very passionate about this project and have turned it from a small mini capstone to a large-scale capstone project that is advertised on Instagram and has grown to fit a wider range of grade levels and students, as we've currently been working rigorously with a 3rd grade class at Eagle Crest, which has tested our abilities and been an amazing experience for both my partner Isaiah and I, as well as the students. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Isaiah Bennett.
Hello, City Council. My name is Isaiah Bennett, and my address is 4901 Nelson Road, Longmont, Colorado. Like my partner Josh Lurie previously stated, we are a part of a senior capstone project called Movement for Memory. Because you have all heard the backstory, I'm going to talk about the present and future of this project. This year, my partner Josh and I reached out to an elementary school teacher at Eagle Crest. This teacher was Mr. Gassetta, and he could not have been more helpful. This project truly worked well because we had a great mentor. We were able to go into his classroom and teach a movement-inspired lesson every month. Throughout these lessons, we were able to get the students moving, active, and along with them having fun and learning new concepts about math. For example, one of our lessons we set up a relay race for the students. Before they could begin the race, they had to answer a math-related question. This combines movement and learning, which Movement for Memory was all about. Along with the benefit of combining moving and learning, we also got to see how much fun the students were having. After about week 2, anytime we would come into the class, the kids would erupt with excitement. They were truly enjoying these lessons, and at the same time, they were learning important math skills they would use for the rest of their lives. For the future of this project, we plan to pass it down to incoming seniors of the SCLA program. We believe that this project can be a long-running SCLA capstone and even implemented into the schools in our local area. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Isaiah, and that is it for the Silver Creek High School. Good luck to all of you. Lila Kaur. Okay. Don't forget to pull that microphone down. There you go.
Good evening, council members of Wilmette City Hall. My name is Sienna Snap. And I am Lila Kaur, and as a student body president, we came to tell you why we think there should be more intense gun laws. Our country has the most shootings in the world, and that is why we came here today. We came for action for our class project, but we feel that it is more than that.
According to the Pew Research Institute, Harvard and Northeastern University, roughly 40% of Americans either own or have a gun, someone in their household who owns a gun. Additionally, gun sales have skyrocketed since COVID-19. According to Dr. David Hammondway, a gun safety expert from Harvard, compared to the other peer countries, basically what we have is by far the weakest gun laws. Not surprisingly, we have huge gun problems.
In Colorado, they just lifted the gun laws, and we don't think that's such a great idea because who knows, we might have a shooting soon, and we want to prevent that from happening. Now, I know we're just kids, but we think that we are kids that can change the future.
As an example, New Zealand had a mass shooting, and after that, they decided to change their ways and have stricter gun laws. And we think we can too, and we think we should. Here are some facts from Amnesty.org and SandyHookPromise.org. Wide access to firearms and loose regulations lead to more than 39,000 men, women, and children being killed with guns each year in the USA.
Since Columbine in 1999, more than 338,000 students in the U.S. have experienced gun violence at school.
In the year 2017, nearly 40,000 people died by guns, which was up by 1,000 from the year before.
On average, more than 360 people in the USA are shot every day and survive at least enough to get to long enough to get to the hospital.
Just recently, right here in Longmont, Colorado, a 16-year-old boy died by the Hobby Lobby while at a car show. He was shot by a gun.
In Colorado, there is an average of 1,800 schools and 889,000 public school students, and we want to keep them safe, including ourselves.
We want to ban guns that have no use, which can easily kill people, like assault rifles. We know that many people come here to City Hall to pass laws. They are not always successful, but we want to be successful.
After the Columbine High School shooting, we feel that we should have changed our ways, and we think it's upsetting to sit and watch nothing happen or change.
I hope we can all agree that keeping our schools safe is important. We wanted to prove that we aren't the only ones who feel this way. So, we obtained 60 signatures from Longmont citizens who all agreed that we need to ban assault rifles. No one we spoke to disagreed. We hope you agree. Please help our community, and we thank you.
Thank you, girls, Lila and Sienna. Lance Whitaker.
Mayor and Council, my name is Lance Whitaker. I live at 1750 Collier Street, Longmont, Colorado. Today is National Teachers Day. It is also National Foster Kids Day. Flavor of the day is also National Truffle Day. So enjoy your truffles today. Me and my friend were discussing HB 191230, and we were brainstorming over the different business ideas that would have come up, and we came up with something rather unique that the business that I'm proposing would be able to address, and that was PTSD in soldiers. While it is legal for you to partake with your doctor, it is not legal to do it in a group setting. So me and my friend thought that that would have been a really nice thing to do to the veteran community of the area, is to hold a PTSD council session if I'm ever able to. Thank you. You have a good day.
Thank you, Lance. Noah Shabaka?
Hello, Council. My name is Noah Schabacher. I live at 918 Grant Street here in Longmont. Every morning, I get up and take my dog for a walk, and we go south and try and cross 9th Street, but it's extremely dangerous. There are no crosswalks at 9th and Grant. There aren't any crosswalks at Sherman, and there aren't any crosswalks at Lincoln. So the nearest crosswalk is about a quarter of a mile away at Francis. But it's not safe to walk on the sidewalk on 9th Street either. The sidewalk itself is only about 46 inches wide. I know because I just measured it. I myself am about 25 inches wide at my widest point. And our dog, even though he's well trained, doesn't walk immediately in front or behind me. So if we encounter anyone when we're walking on the sidewalk, someone has to step into a neighbor's yard or into the street. The other problem with this, besides not being safe, is it's undignified. We don't require drivers to go a quarter mile out of their way in order to travel 40 feet. All of our streets that run east-west in Longmont in this area have the same problem. 3rd, 9th, 11th, Mountain View, 17th. They're all designed for high-speed car travel, and they make almost no allowance for pedestrians. In fact, as we know, one member of our community died on 3rd Street when they were trying to cross the street last year. I'm asking the council, in light of the presentation on Vision Zero last week, to consider installing new infrastructure on these streets to discourage speeding and to encourage and to allow pedestrians to cross safely. That can be something like raised crosswalks, speed humps, more lights and stop signs, anything to design the streets so that citizens can walk safely and cross the streets, and so that cars are able to coexist with people, and so that our streets are safer. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Noah. Seeing no one else on the list, I'm going to close public invited to be heard. We are now at our Longmont Public Media update. Invite Sergio Angeles.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Sergio Angeles. I'm the Executive Director and Co-Founder of Longmont Public Media. And I'm here tonight to give an update on 2022 and Q1 of 2023. So for the agenda, we're going to just go over some metrics. Then we'll talk about some of the updates from Q1 of this year. And then we'll also briefly talk about the future of LPM. So let's kind of start off with some of the geeky stuff and some of the metrics. So in terms of LPM memberships, so in 2022, we had just a little bit under 370 total memberships. 98 of those are paid and 270 of those are free. You can see that there's just been continuing growth across our memberships from when we started in 2020. And as of the end of Q1, we have 117 paid memberships and 285 free members. In regards to membership revenue, we actually surpassed our projection in 2022 with $23,573. That's more than double from 2021. And in Q1 of this year, we reached $6,420 of membership revenue. And while membership revenue is important, we actually want to make sure that the space is actually being used. So in 2022, usage hours across the total space, so that includes all the TV studios, podcast rooms, editing rooms, etc. We reached 2,365 hours, so just a little bit under half, or sorry, a little bit under double from 2021. And in Q1 of this year, we've had 728 usage hours. I might add that this might be a little bit low, just because some people may have forgotten to make reservations. So we actually think the numbers are a bit higher. Now for the total hours watched of LPM content across all of our platforms is in 2022 is 4,417 hours. So that's across our YouTube channel, our Facebook page, Vimeo, Roku, our website. What's not included on here are all the Comcast channels, all 3 public access Comcast channels. We don't get data from that. Also not included on here is any City of Longmont, any videos that we created for the City of Longmont. In Q1, we had 1,946 hours. You can see it's almost double what we had last year. The reason for that is we started creating YouTube Shorts. So that's bite-sized content similar to TikTok. So we've been getting a lot more distribution, a lot more reach that way. And since the beginning, so since January 1st, 2020, just a little bit under 30,000 hours have been watched across Longmont Public Media. Now, some of the more popular videos or shows watched in 2022 was Boulder County Tonight pre-election special, the Longmont Light Parade 2022, Winging It Episode 1, Thursday Night at the Museum, Hazel Miller and the Collective, and Rational Politics. The most popular videos for Q1 of this year were Artists of Longmont Episode 1, the Comfy Couch Performance Circle, a comedy open mic night at LPM, the backstory on a call to action, and the LPM Shorts Forum interview with Tom Parkin. In terms of most liked videos, this is primarily just on YouTube. The top 5 in 2022 were Boulder County Tonight, the LPM unboxing of our Kodak Reels digitizer, Winging It Episode 1, Louisiana Glen Episode 2, and the Longmont Lights Parade 2022. Now, the list that you see here, these are the most disliked videos also from YouTube. We don't know why these were the most disliked. Could be people didn't like the title or the topic or who was in there. We get none of that data whatsoever. The most liked videos of Q1, most of these, with the exception being the Artists of Longmont, are all YouTube Shorts. So that's, again, bite-sized content around 1 minute or so long. And the most disliked were all YouTube Shorts, since we tend to splice some of the content into smaller bite-sized pieces. And since people tend to doom scroll, they may have just not liked any of the content they've seen. What you see on the screen here, these are some of the shows that have been produced and broadcast on Longmont Public Media. I won't read the entire list. There's a wide variety and diversity across shows and content, anything from real estate to unboxing videos to concerts to cultural festivals like the Diwali Fest 2022 to sports games like the 2022 Longmont Cricket Championship. Just a little bit of everything, and we continue just to have just a wide variety of content that we distribute and or is produced at Longmont Public Media. Some other metrics for last year, the total number of users or viewers was 71,600, total impressions 548,000. The average percentage of a video an LPM viewer watches per view is 8.5%, and the average view duration is 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Now the same data only for Q1, total users and viewers was 87,825. Again, that's due to the YouTube short content. Total impressions was 292,000. The average percentage of a video an LPM viewer watches per view is 16.9%, and the average view duration is 1 minute and 5 seconds. So now I want to just talk about some of the updates and some of the stuff we've done last quarter. So first, we applied to 4 grants, one of which is a CDS request. So that's a congressionally directed spending request to U.S. Senator Hickenlooper's office. We were just informed last week that we did make the first round and it passed his office. So we're now in the second phase, which is great news. We don't know when they'll complete that phase, but should we, should this request get granted and approved, we wouldn't see any of that funding till 2024. We've started working with Workforce Boulder County to develop workforce development programs to train video producers, editors, and social media managers. We actually just started the first internship last week for someone who wants to be a video producer and editor. Also in January 2023, we hosted the Creative District Happy Hour. We had a panel of just really incredible local creatives. So we live streamed that, live broadcast that, just had a lot of people in the space, all their local creatives who hadn't been in there before, and they were able to just kind of experience everything that we have to offer. We also held the first LPM Shorts film screening. So this is a completely member-created, member-run event by an LPM member named John Williams. And this event showcases local films by local directors and creators. It was completely sold out, including the second one. These are now quarterly, so I would highly recommend all of you come attend if you can. Longmont Public Media was also a venue for the Winter Walkabout, so we hosted 4 concerts there. In 2023, we also live streamed and live broadcast all those. We did host a field trip by the Montessori School for middle school students, so that the students can come in and see the space, learn about content creation, try out equipment, and just kind of have a blast there in the space. We also hosted a field trip for the American Association of University Women. We started working with the Innovation Center to have Longmont Public Media be part of students' curriculum. So the way this would work is that some of the students at the Innovation Center, they have access to a full broadcasting studio, and we would make it part of the curriculum for them to either broadcast live on Channel 8 or any other channels. And that's just one of the ideas that we have that probably won't happen until 2024. And lastly, we're working again with the CETC, so that's the Career Elevation Technology Center, to have another summer internship program for high school students this summer. So that'll be starting in June for 10 weeks. We plan to have at least 4 interns this summer. Now you may be kind of wondering, since I announced that I would be stepping down from my role as executive director, why I'm still here, or what's going to happen with Longmont Public Media. And as we, as I announced to the board and our advisory board that I'd be stepping down, we had just a really great conversation about what's next, what's the future, a lot of great questions, and some of those questions that we asked ourselves were, how can we continue to grow, and how can we deliver more value to our community. And some of the options that we explored was simply hiring another executive director. We did, in fact, put a job position out. We also discussed, maybe there's someone internally at Longmont Public Media that would be interested in an executive role. And lastly, we met with a bunch of other local organizations to talk about, is there a potential for a merger or a partnership of some kind? And what we ultimately decided was that the best way that we can create a better future for Longmont Public Media was to do that together with Tinkermill, our sister makerspace. You might be wondering, why Tinkermill? We think it's quite simple. We're both makerspaces. Makerspaces are a place for people to come in and gather. Makerspaces have equipment. Makerspaces have people that want to use that equipment to create really incredible things. And makerspaces have people that teach other people how to create really incredible things. At its core, we're both 501c3 educational nonprofits and charities, and we believe that we could cross-pollinate skills, talent, people, culture, community. And ultimately, it takes a certain skill set to be able to run a makerspace. So in the coming months, Tinkermill and Longmont Public Media will sign a MOU to explore a partnership. We're looking at various entity structures like what you see on the screen there. But ultimately, Aaron Horde, who's the current executive director of Tinkermill, will be the executive director of both organizations. And some of the benefits to this partnership is that members will have access to both Tinkermill and Longmont Public Media. We would have lower administrative expenses and overhead. We see that there's limitless educational and content synergies, and we would ultimately become one of the largest makerspaces in the US with over 1,100 members, just here in Longmont, Colorado. In regards to future opportunities to grow, we believe that, well, we've received numerous requests from variety of different people about how can we create a Tinkermill, or how can we create an LPM in Mars City. So we believe that this partnership and whatever entity structure we ultimately decide on would allow us to do just that and possibly even launch additional maker spaces, not just here in Colorado, but maybe across the US. So with that, I just want to say thank you. Thank you all for your support in making LPM happen and to thrive. My last day at LPM will be the end of June. So it's been just an honor, and I've been really grateful to have the opportunity to work with all of you, work with city staff, Sandy, Marika, Eric, and Dallas. So thank you. And on that note, does anyone have any questions?
Thank you, Sergio. Do we have any questions or comments from counselors? Seeing none, congratulations on what you've done in this past year and a half. It's a much better business organization, it looks like.
Thanks,
so,
Mayor Peck.
thank you.
Thank you.
So we are at now our study session items, which is a review of the Boulder County Coordinated Comprehensive Development Plan.
Thank you, Mayor Peck and council members. We are going to present the Boulder County Coordinated Comprehensive Development Plan Intergovernmental Agreements to you tonight and get some input. But these are just two of the IGAs that affect planning and development. I should say I'm Glenn Vandenwagen, I'm the planning director. But there's other agreements that we have that affect the perimeter of our planning area as well as development within. We have agreements with Meade, Frederick, Firestone, Weld County, and St. Vrain Valley School District as well regarding schools and their growth within Longmont. But these are two very important agreements, and they both are due to expire this year. So we thought we'd give you a briefing on that and get your input whether you want to see them continue on into the future. So the overarching goal of these two agreements is basically to create a rural development area that surrounds our building area. Physically, the idea is to separate the communities in Boulder County so that we each have our unique identity and we kind of avoid the megalopolis of all the cities growing together. It also keeps the county rural, and but there are some provisions, there's some limitations on annexation, but there's also provisions to allow infrastructure expansion to allow the city to grow within. I'm going to cover these kind of backwards in time. We've actually had the Longmont Planning Area IGA since I think 1997, that we've been continuing to update a total of 3 times and extending the time frame with Boulder County. And then in 2003, the county decided to create an umbrella agreement, which is called the Super IGA. So I'll start with the Super IGA and kind of go over what is provided therein. So it's rooted in Colorado revised statutes regarding intergovernmental agreements, and the overarching goal there is that government should be able to combine their powers for more efficient and effective government. And in this case, it's the city's powers of zoning and annexation and the county's powers of building plan review and zoning as well. So those are kind of the ideas of what created this super IGA. It included initially, back in 2003, all of the communities, including Longmont in Boulder County, which included Boulder, Erie, Jamestown, Lafayette, Louisville, those trips me up, Lyons, Nederland, and Superior. So again, the overall idea is to keep the county rural, but allow the cities to grow within. There are some exceptions to allow us to grow beyond our designated planning area, but I'll get into that in a little bit more detail with when we talk about our particular Longmont planning area, IGA. And then there's other issues that's kind of thrown in the end of the super IGA that it kind of opens the door for other discussions with the county, and that could be over revenue sharing, affordable housing, or library services. And I don't know what the issues were in 2003, but I'm sure those issues are still with us today. It expires on October 16th, 2023. The agreement did allow an opportunity to extend it another 20 years if we did that 10 years ago. So I don't know why, whether we just missed it or whether it was a concerted effort not to extend it again. But the super IGA will expire on October 16th, 2023. If you decide to renew it, we will update it and bring it forward brand new, basically. Now, some of the communities may have extended at that 10-year mark. My understanding are there's, at this point, a bit of a jagged group of communities that are part of the super RGA and some that are not. I haven't reached out to all of them to see what their intent is of whether they want to renew the super IGA or not, but we could certainly do that. So one thing I wanted to point out is some of the goals of the super IGA of creating that rural open space area around various cities is mirrored in our Envision Longmont master plan. And I highlighted a section of the code that talks about open spaces, many of which are active agricultural lands, are valued by the community for their role in maintaining Longmont's status as a freestanding community. And that's kind of the idea. From an urban design standpoint, the communities ought to stand alone physically within Boulder County. The other exhibit to the right shows some of those neighboring communities that we also have IGAs with, Meade, Firestone, and Frederick. And as you can see on the left, the exhibit, we have pretty much completed that circle of open space around Longmont's planning area. And I will note that David Bell is going to be queued up in a future study session or meeting to talk specifically about the acquisition of open space and what that looks like today. But I wanted to point out that it is still a part of our Envision Longmont. This is the super detailed map for the super IGA that shows all the communities and the rural preservation areas around each community in Boulder County. Just to define a couple of the things you see on the map, the kind of ochre color or light tan color are those areas within our planning area that potentially could be annexed. This is pretty old, so we've annexed a good deal of them already. And then the darker area around that is the area where we create our underlying plan, they call it, in the super IGA, and that is our Longmont Planning IGA. And that's where the more specific rules of how we annex in that area or expand into that area are described. And then the white areas are the unincorporated rural lands, which are basically way outside these underlying plans. So the Longmont Planning Area, IGA, as far as the rules for annexation, and as I mentioned before, this first started in 1997. We've adopted it or extended it 3 times. This agreement could be approved as is if we do it prior to July, I think, 15 of this year. So we did want to bring it forward. This has been kind of the workhorse for us as far as a lot of ways, and mainly the annexation rules are that, again, the county areas beyond our planning areas are to remain rural, so there's not many opportunities for annexation, but there's a few. One might be they actually, from an economic development standpoint, they laid out a situation where we might get a large industrial user that's interested in developing in Longmont, but perhaps we don't have an appropriate site, but there might be one in Boulder County that we could annex and provide utilities. So they have a very specific section for that possibility. I don't know if it's happened in the county, but it's in there as of now. Basically, you cannot give a reason that the land in Longmont is too expensive. That is not a reason why we could allow a user to locate outside our planning area and annex them. Any existing subdivision that's located on the perimeter, I think the county would love to have us annex, so that's a possibility. And then there's the transfer of development rights, which it states we could annex a receiving site. And I'm not an expert in the county TDR system, but basically the idea is remove development units off land in the county that they want to preserve and move them onto another site where you may be able to create a little bit more of an urban density. Sometimes they're within the city's planning area because we can provide utilities, but there are some adjacent. Certainly, and then they always will put a conservation easement over that receiving site. So the Longmont Planning Area IGA says we could annex those sites, but only after the county has removed that conservation site. And you might be familiar with Canamono Estates. That's exactly the situation that's going through right now. So that's their main way of creating the open space around the perimeter of the city. There's also an agreement that Boulder County will not purchase open space within our planning area unless the city council agrees. And I believe that has happened on a few cases. We certainly have a large amount of open space that's on the north end of our planning area where, and I think it was purchased by Boulder County. We use this agreement quite a bit with infrastructure expansion. The agreement basically says, yes, we're going to limit expansion out, but we won't allow that to hinge on utilities or roadways that need to serve the planning area. So staff has, and basically there's language in that they will take those permits and move them ahead of the line. There's a process in the county called a 1041 process, which can really extend out in an infrastructure project. It basically requires environmental review and looking at different alternatives, and it can stretch out much longer. But we've been pretty effective in using this IGA to create some infrastructure really rather quickly. So we have tested that requirement. Here's what our planning map looks like. Again, this is really old, but it does pretty accurately show our Longmont planning area. At this point in 1997, the green areas are the open space areas that had been acquired. As a part of the TDR process, the county uses a zoning mechanism called non-urban planned unit development. So those areas are shown, and again, those areas that are within our planning area that have that zoning Certainly, we can annex, we just refer it to the county, and you've seen a bazillion of those, I'm sure. And then they also threw in that there's these 4 subdivisions that kind of grown over time up north of our planning area, and we could annex those as well. I'm not sure why we would. I'm sure it would cost a lot to provide. I don't know, maybe we provide utilities to those areas? Do we? Do you know? No? Okay. Yeah, the yellow ones up at the top that are numbered. We don't provide utilities. Okay. And then I just wanted to show you our future land use map. And again, you see all those open space areas shown in our planning area, and the light green ones are surrounding our planning area. So I think what you'll see when you see the detailed presentation on the open space acquisition process that the city has gone through, we have pretty much surrounded the community at this point. So we've pretty much implemented these agreements. So that's why we're asking direction from staff. One is direct staff to work with Boulder County staff to renew the super and the Longmont Planning Area IGA, or direct us not to renew the IGAs, or something in between, whether it's with conditions or not. And I guess, and we have been talking to staff. I think our staff feels there is value in the Longmont Planning Area IGA because we do have infrastructure projects out there. If it can help us move those through the process, that would really be beneficial. We may have all the open space, and maybe there's not even an opportunity to expand beyond our planning area, but at least for the benefit of getting the infrastructure in, there would be some benefit in the Longmont Planning Area IGA. The super IGA, it's really one more, I guess I'd look at as kind of a spirit de corps. We're all in it together, and it's good to know all the other communities are going to sign up to that super IGA, but that I don't know. In talking to the Boulder staff, our IGA can exist on its own and continue on without the super IGA. So let's give you a little bit of background, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that council might have.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Yes, it was very interesting to see the evolution of the maps. What I'm not sure I really understand is, especially with the Longmont Planning Area IGA, what the terms are, what the give and take is among the signatories. You know, why do we need it? Does it give us, does it make annexation simpler? Does it make it like a use by right? You know, I mean, what do we get? What do we give?
In the super IGA, basically that just sets the rules for everybody. So at least we know that Erie is playing by the same rules we are. With our LPA IGA, we still reference the annexation to the county regardless. So I don't know that there's a whole lot of give and take other than they have committed to working with us on the utilities that are needed for the city to expand. And that could also be it could be a trail. It doesn't have to be a roadway. Phil is working with them to extend the St. Vrain Trail beyond our western planning area up to one of the lakes up there. I can't think of the name right now, but there's other projects like that for use in the open space areas.
Well, so I'm still missing, you said the super IGA sets the rules. Well, what kind of rules are they? Like who you apply to for this or that ask? I mean, I have no idea.
It's really specific to annexation and acquisition of open space. So there are some provisions where the city could go extraterritorial with utilities and provide utilities for whatever reason, up to 2.5 miles out. And then it's kind of their agreement that they won't come and buy open space within our planning area without your approval.
Okay.
That's how I read the basic balancing.
Yeah, okay, that clarifies it a bit, thank you.
I think part of it too, while it, obviously the issues when this was initiated are different than what they are today. Prior to many of you all being on the council, we had brought all the councils together where we had a joint meeting specifically talking about affordable housing, agreeing to the 12% goal, and multiple cities passed resolutions. But there was really nothing with teeth that said, here's what we're going to try to do. That could theoretically be something that we try to put into a super IGA, is really everyone committing to that 12%, minimum of a 12% goal. When we talk about the more specific IGA, what I think Glenn was also referring to is we look forward to the expansion in Nelson Flanders and really working with our water system, the tank there. We would want to negotiate that into the IGA to streamline that approval process so that we don't get caught up in extensive delays as we're trying to expand Nelson Flanders on property that we own. So it's things like that we would want to negotiate into this to help streamline our processes.
Thank you.
Councilor Waters?
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Real quickly, 3 quick questions. Glenn, you made reference to infrastructure that we've been able to extend because of the, I don't know if it's the super IGA or the planning area IGA. Could you just give an example or two of what you were thinking, what you're referring to?
I think there was a raw water line that was put in Highway 66 that went through this process. Okay, an extension of the county approval of conditions of Longmont's planned Clover Basin water line. We basically got additional 10 years to get that done through the IGA. Permitting Longmont to construct raw water pipeline to the Highline Ditch to deliver water to the Nelson Flanders Water Treatment Plant that Harold just mentioned. And there was some design clarifications for Highway 66 storm drainage project that allowed us to do some berming, I guess, to protect the roadway. And and most recently, annexation of the Peschel property that we actually bought jointly. That's interesting outside of Boulder County as well. But there were some agreements about Quicksilver Road that was part of that as well.
And that would be the infrastructure part of that Peschel acquisition.
Yeah.
So the IGA, in each of those examples, or at least in the Nelson Flanders and in Dry Creek, the IGA allowed us to accelerate getting done what we needed to get done for our purposes.
Correct.
That was the value.
Yes.
That was my first question. Second question, what are the implications of for the super IGA, some municipalities and the county renewing and others not? You mentioned some jagged edges. Does that really matter to us if not all the municipalities participate? Is there some reason we ought to be reaching out or working with the county to bring folks together and have a kumbaya on this?
I'm not sure on that. I think what I heard is perhaps Erie may not renew, Nederland, and another community that slips my mind. But I don't know that it has to be an all or nothing type of situation. I think we do need to get some intelligence on what other communities are looking at. And as Harold mentioned, there is that opportunity to discuss other issues, affordable housing being one of them.
So, I mean, those are all interesting opportunities, but on the maybe that's downside, but among the implications, if a municipality, fill in the blank area someplace else, chooses not to participate, and now we're operating with different rules in terms of annexation. Now, the potential conflicts between municipalities, is that where that goes?
I think that's more of a conflict with the specific municipality and the county. And
Not
that
between municipalities.
Not necessarily between municipality. I think if there's an area for that to occur is if we do try to have the affordable housing conversation and people are in different spots. And that really goes back to, I think, what really was the crux of the conversation when everyone came together is we want everyone to agree to do the same thing. And my suggestion in this is just putting a little more teeth into it as you look to the future.
So you answered a question I wasn't going to ask, but I should have, and that is, from a staff perspective, we ought to be thinking about adding to this. The renewal is one thing, but that's maybe necessary, not sufficient, because there are other things we ought to include. Will that be driven by David's presentation on open space or some other agenda item?
Well, in multiple things. You heard me mention the infrastructure pieces in Nelson Flanders and wanting to get more certainty and getting more specific and moving through some of these processes even faster than we've been able to in the past. So there will be some operational needs that we will bring into play as staff.
That's stuff that you'd work through with the county.
Correct.
And then come back, when it's back on this agenda for approval, those would all be baked in.
Correct.
To what, all right, last question, and I think I would know the answer, but are there any downsides from a staff perspective to signaling or given direction to move forward with whatever needs to be added and bring something back to this council for approval? Any downsides?
I can't think of any. I think at one point I was thinking if there are people that don't participate in the overall super IGA, does that mean they're going to be able to cook some other deal with the county? And I really don't think so. So, and I believe all those other communities have these planning area agreements. And they're getting the benefits that we are. So I don't think anybody has a reason to drop out of the underlying planning agreements.
Thanks.
Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Oh, Glenn, I really appreciate your presentation tonight. I think kind of some of the things I saw, but the comment that you made in regards to setting the rules, I think is really one of the underlying issues here. When I was looking at the map there where you showed Longmont and the open space and then its neighbors, and I think it kind of shows, we see Meade and we see Firestone really kind of getting into that area that would have probably been, we weren't in an all-fire rush to develop those, so for some strange reason they felt compelled to go into that area, which would have probably been a logical area for Longmont to develop at some point, maybe 20, 30 years, and they got a little bit trigger happy to move into those areas. And so then I look at that and I think, not that I think we have to worry here in Longmont so much about Erie. I think that they've kept an ongoing battle with Lafayette and Superior and that area to keep their energy focused in that area. So I don't think they're going to be trying to move towards Niwot or anything like that. But I think that the issue is that if we don't have some sort of rules, what do we got? And I think it's really critical to see how we control our own destiny here in Longmont, and also at least have a say from a standpoint from a governmental entity and group, how the rest of the county fares. If we had seen that same sort of aggressive behavior from Meade and Firestone from, let's say, Lyons, we'd be kind of going like, what's that about? And it was pretty clear in some of those cases that they really didn't have the water, they didn't have the infrastructure or anything else to go there. It was just, they were going to try to show us. And so I think this is one of those things that we kind of have to do to make it work, so at least we're talking to the people that we are most likely to have interaction with, and then we can deal with some of the other issues maybe in Weld County at some other point.
Yeah. I think one advantage is, at least what I learned from staff, is they would really love to have Longmont sign on to the super IGA because they can show the other communities. Like Longmont did it. You know, it's not something to be feared, and there's an advantage to it. So maybe we have a little bit something to twist there.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Harold, you cited affordable housing as one. There was a second issue that you said that we might want to negotiate as it comes to the IGA. What was that again?
I think that was related to putting in infrastructure, and specifically Nelson Flanders, and the expansion of that plant and the processes that we would have to go through. I think those are the two that I mentioned.
Okay, those were the two. So essentially speaking, or essentially what I'm getting at is that I agree with staff's recommendations. And so I would move to direct staff to negotiate the renewal of the IGAs with recommendations about affordable housing and infrastructure and any other items that staff may feel is pertinent to the IGAs.
Okay, so the motion to renegotiate with the other municipalities with the addition of what Mayor Pro Tem has asked for, and it was seconded by Councilor McCoy. I do have a question before we vote on this. What if all of the municipalities agreed to be in a super IGA and an issue came up, but we didn't think it would be something we would want to partner on? What would the blowback be from that, or would there be any? Do we commit to being a partner on a project with the others automatically because we are part of the super IGA?
I don't think so. I think this is just a high-level framework, but I don't think it has us commit to anything in particular in what we're going to do.
Okay, okay,
Yeah,
great.
I believe all the signees would have to agree to any kind of major change to that super IGA too.
Okay, great. So let's vote. And that carries unanimously.
Great.
Thank you,
Mayor.
Glenn.
Thank you, Council.
So the next thing on our agenda is a 2024 budget discussion. This is the beginning of our budget discussion.
No, go ahead. I don't care.
Mayor, members of council, Jim Golden, the Chief Financial Officer. And this is the beginning of our budget process for 2024. Staff has already begun to work on CIP submissions and begin to put together their budget requests that are due at the end of this month. And we annually do meet with the council during May to give you a little bit of a glimpse of what the expectations are that we have looking forward to this budget process, and also to allow you an opportunity to give us any direction in regards to that budget process. So I've got about 15 slides to go through, and I'd be glad to answer any questions along the way. And we would again, welcome your direction at the end of it if you have any. And I'm sure the city manager will probably want to jump in now and then to add a little clarity. So here's the schedule. So as I said, we begin preparing budget requests already. They'll due at the end of the month. In June and July, the staff and the city manager review those requests and meet with departments to discuss them. And in July, probably July and for some a little bit into early August, we'll do our 2024 revenue projection finalizations. And also in early August, we then also more or less make final decisions on balancing the budgets so that we can put the proposed budget document and CIP document together for the council to receive. It'll be on August 29th this year so that we can meet the September 1st charter deadline for presenting the budget.
I'm going to jump in.
Go ahead.
So one of the things I did want to point out to council is when we look at the CIP work, we've actually started those meetings already. One of the things that we were seeing in terms of our CIP is you're going to be seeing a carryover budget ordinance, and we weren't finishing things in terms of where we were funding. So last year in the budget process, we specifically talked about ability to finish the projects within a designated time frame. Some of those projects in the CIP, we have to accrue funds over time. We know what those are and we have to deal with that. But it was some of the others that we weren't just finishing. And so when we went into the CIP process this year, our instructions were a little different to staff. It was, we want to see that you're finishing the projects that are in the queue before we add additional projects to the list and diverting some of our attention. So I will say that the CIP process this year will probably be more narrow and focused and fewer ads, and you're going to see more of projects that we're finishing. That was one side of the equation. The other side of it was what we're also seeing in many of our CIP projects, especially those where we had to accrue money, is with inflation, the costs are going up dramatically. We gave the presentation to you all a couple of months ago about what we were seeing in cost increases. So we think we're also going to have to use funds that are available in order to bridge those the cost increases that we're seeing. So just wanted to let you know that was my direction and staff. In order, we need to finish things. We need to deal with what's over budget, and there doesn't really need to be any new CIP projects added this year, so we can catch up and finish what we need to finish.
So we, picking up in September, we'll do presentations and a public hearing. And in October, we do a second public hearing. The council then will give us final direction, and we will put together the ordinances and resolutions for actions by the council during October and have a budget adopted by the end of October. So I'm just going to give you some general results. We we're very close to being finished with the draft of our financial statements. Our audit's currently underway at this point in time. And so some of the numbers I'm presenting might still be subject to change. I know that at least one or two in particular are definitely still being worked on this week. They'll probably be finalized in a few days. But these are going to give you a general idea of the major funds and where they stand moving into this budget process. So the general fund has got a fund balance ending the year of $48.4 million, and that's $6.7 million greater than what we ended 2021 with. That $6.7 million difference in general can be attributed to about $2.5 million of emergency reserves that the council designated in the 23 budget process, $1.7 million of carryover, greater amount of carryover than we had in the previous year, and then there's another $2.2 million of basically uncommitted available fund balance. So our total general fund specific fund balance, there's actually, we have under our accounting requirements, we have to include the Art and Public Places Fund as part of the general fund in our annual financial reports. So we're backing out the Art and Public Places Fund and a couple other smaller entities, and the general fund specific fund balance is $46.6 million. We have a $5.6 million TABOR reserve and $13.4 million emergency reserve. So that's a total of $19 million of emergency reserves. We've talked about TABOR reserves in the past. They're very hard to really access, so we've had our own emergency reserve requirements over and above that, and that's moved up to $13.4 million with the actions taken in the last budget process. We have $8 million of encumbered or carryover type expenditures. That's one of the numbers that I know will change and will go downwards, and when it does, it will increase the final number down at the bottom. But we have 6.28 million of fund balance that's assigned for specific purposes. Majority, about 2/3 of that is the oil and gas monies that we have set aside for those related purposes, and then there's some other major and some minor areas that we have assigned monies for. We have 5.24 million budgeted for one-time expenses in the 23 budget, so that was again from our 23 budget process where we used fund balance for one-time expenses. And then we have $1.13 million of non-spendable restricted reserves. And finally, $6.9 million of available fund balance moving into the 2024 budget process for a one-time type of expenses. And as I mentioned, that number will go up a little bit more for ending the year of 2022. And then as 23 goes on, if we project that operations will generate any savings, that could also increase that. So a little bit more on those results. So where does all that extra money come from? On the revenue side, the sales tax revenue amounts those were very significant. It was about $4.26 million more than what we had budgeted for revenue in 2022. The Excel franchise fees were very significantly higher than budget, about over $500,000 higher than budget. And plan check fees were over $400,000 over budget. So those are the major amounts that generated some fund balance. And as well, we had some significant savings on the spending side as well. Our emergency reserves, I referred to the $13.4 million already. That equates to an 8% emergency reserve and now a 4.87% stabilization reserve. And our goal, stated council goal, is to move that up to 8% in the long run. We were at 4.15% last year. Moving on to the public safety fund results. They ended the year with a total fund balance of $13.1 million. 7.8 of that is uncommitted at the end of 2022, though we have since during 2023 already appropriated $1.25 million of that for a CIP project. And then we've got an 8% emergency reserve in that fund of $1.4 million. A couple other larger operating funds. These are both sales tax driven funds. The Public Improvement Fund ended 2022 with an available fund balance of almost $3 million. Of that amount, we do have in the future CIP years, we've used $2.09 million of that amount. So in a sense, that is committed, but not since we haven't appropriated it. And so that leaves us a fund balance of uncommitted dollars of a little over $900,000 going into this budget process in the Public Improvement Fund. Street Fund ended 2022 with a total fund balance of $28.3 million. And of that amount, $6.6 million is uncommitted. So the rest of it is carryover, projects in process, things like that. And since the end of the year, we have also appropriated $1.2 million of that in 2023 for projects. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the revenues. First, sales and use tax revenue. Last year, we finished up 9.4% over our budget or I should say over our previous year of 2021 in sales and use tax revenue. Yeah.
Sorry. Would you mind taking questions now, or do you want us to wait?
No, anytime's fine.
Okay, Counselor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Back to the street fund. It was a weird winter, and what's said around town is that the damage to the streets is greater than in an average year. Is that going to affect allocations, or do we have a problem in budgeting because of that?
So generally, if you remember when we talked to you about the projects and where they were sitting and the cost overruns, the good news is, in terms of the bids that came in on the resurfacing project, based on what we have bid out, that's, I think, the one bid that came in where we needed it. So in terms of the work for 2023 on the street reconstruction, based on the plan that we have, that's planned to move forward in 2023. There may be some operational requirements that we have to deal with in terms of the potholes that we're seeing, and then reassessing in what's going to come in the next year as part of this budget process and what we were able to get done this year. At the same time, and you'll see this at a later slide, would remind you all that we have First and Main Transit Station that we need to deal with. We have Kaufman Street. We do have a plan to deal with those, which is utilizing a lot of the fund balance that Jim is talking about over this year and next year, as we're trying to balance that out over time.
Thank you.
Counselor Waters.
Quick, Jim, on slide 6, the one you're on, that K should be an M, I suppose. Just if I read the paragraph.
2.9.
It's not 2.0, 209,000. It's 2,900,000 or 2,090,000. The two. Should be an M rather than a K. I think it's million, not 1,000. All right, I just want.
Can you turn on your microphone, Jim? No, it's okay.
That's correct. It's 2.09 million.
Million. That's what I thought. As I'm making notes, I don't want to get. I don't make the wrong note here.
As long as we're on this slide, I also have a question. When you talk about the Public Improvement Fund, what does that encompass in public improvement?
So the Public Improvement Fund, so we have a 2% of our non-earmarked sales tax is split between the general fund, which is kind of operating type expenses, and then the Public Improvement Fund gets 15% of that money for capital projects. And these are capital projects not that don't have a funding source, let's say like an enterprise fund or designated sales tax like streets. And so we use that for a number of different purposes that might be tied to general fund type services or operations. And you'll see a lot of parks type projects. We have recreation services in there, and then we have a lot of city facilities are funded through there with the recurring type expenses that we have for maintaining our facilities. It also, when we did a bond issue, excuse me, in 2019, the last election that we had to do the rehab for our facilities, we did that out of the Public Improvement Fund for, we did it through a bond where we put the money in the Public Improvement Fund. So those projects are also a part of this and make up this fund balance as well.
Okay.
And on this one, to kind of talk about it, it is re-roofing, it's flooring. I mean, you'll see a lot of just basic facility maintenance that's capital related in this. One of the things that we are seeing in terms of the bond projects, and as we got into this building, the library, and now the public safety building, it just seems like they're the gifts that keep on giving, and literally every time we go into a wall, we're seeing more and more issues, and so we know many of these projects are starting to push the budget to the point where I think we had some money we wanted to spend on the assessments of some other buildings, but it looks like on these three, it's going to take that and probably more money from potentially the Public Improvement Fund or the Public Safety Fund to finish out those projects, just because I think the amount of damage was a lot more than anyone anticipated.
And that's kind of why I brought this up, because we're always going to have a maintenance problem on these buildings, on all of our buildings. So when I look at the reserve, your emergency reserve accounts, why don't we have a reserve that we're building up specifically for maintaining our assets? Because what I wonder, and I don't know, you'd have to educate me on this, because it just is a public improvement fund that encompasses many different things, not just maintenance on our buildings. Are we, depending upon what the issue is, are we taking from one project that we had decided because we have an emergency in another? And because we have 904 million, 496,000, no, that's not million, that's thousand.
That would be the reserve we need.
That it's uncommitted this year, is there any way we can put those uncommitted funds every year in a reserve account specifically for maintenance on these buildings? Because as you mentioned, Harold, when we look at them, when they come to our attention, they're hugely expensive. It's not, I don't know, that's just a suggestion. I've always wondered why we don't have a maintenance reserve on our assets.
Yeah, I think when we look at the buildings that we're working on now, the work that we're actually doing, that we've completed on this one in the foundation, the library, and then now public safety, is that's really projected to add another 50 years life expectancy to those buildings. The key for us is to have, as we look at ongoing operational dollars, and we look at some of those other accounts within the public improvement fund in terms of roofing, is to make sure we're funding those appropriately as we're moving forward. I think what you're also talking about is the concept of a replacement reserve, which if we looked at some of the projects that we put on in terms of potentially on the ballot, that is including that kind of concept of a replacement reserve to deal with this in the future. But I think we're making a lot of progress on this. I think in terms of the buildings that we have left, it's the rec center, of which that's one that's tied into the other project. The Children, Youth, and Family is one that we're seeing with some issues now, and then the memorial building, and I think that takes care of the majority of them. seniors, until the next assessment.
And then they're all going to start recycling again.
And so that's where we've got to figure out on the operational side, we have to bring this all together.
Okay.
But we're in catch-up mode right now because the work that I think we're doing on these buildings probably should have been done
Exactly.
20 plus years ago, but excuse me. But we're
Okay.
making progress. If something drastic happened, that's when we would look into the emergency stabilization reserve, but we were able to manage this through our existing resources.
Okay. Thank you. Just a suggestion. Councilor McCoy.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So Harold, sorry for pulling you back right as you're trying to mid-cough there. What I kind of heard from you during our council retreat was exactly what you're kind of conveying here, in the sense that this was kind of a maintenance year to kind of get things cleared up, the things that obviously were in the worst case, condition. And so obviously, we want to focus on that, and so I see this in the budget this year, and I also hear that from where you're coming from, in the sense that you want to make sure that our investments stay in good shape. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Yeah, and I would say it's been probably 6-7 years of maintenance work.
Yeah,
and we have a few more years to go. So kind of for the public's education on this, just wanting, so they can see that, where we are sometimes, and then we're up against other obstacles, obviously, in regards to, manpower and everything, like everybody else is.
Correct, and then inflation on top of that.
Right.
Unfortunately, we've talked about this before, the millions of dollars that we put into this building, the library, and public safety. Public safety is a little bit different because we're trying to build in some space into what we're doing based on the curve that we talked to you all about that has to be removed. Might as well add space when we're doing it. But the majority of the work we're doing, you can't actually see it. I mean, if you look at this building, the front columns we worked on, and then you see a new railing. Everything else was really redoing the post-tension slab, and now all you see in the garage is a ceiling. And so this was really core foundational work that we're doing, and what we did, you can see under the carpet where they were stitching the cracks and everything else. And so this was as basic as it gets.
That's what I wanted the public to hear, so that they understood, because that's clearly not something that we see. It's not the beautiful things. It's
Right.
it's the things that just keep us going. Thank you.
Okay, I'll get back into where I was on the sales and use tax. So I said last year was, we were up 9.4% over the previous year. And that exceeded our budget, which was actually a 0.49% decline since we had conservatively budgeted going into that year. So with the conservative projections for '22, our sales and use tax for our '23 budget for this year for sales and use tax is 1.71% over last year's collections. So we just need 1.71% growth this year to meet budget. So I send you those updates monthly, and unfortunately, one of the things about the timing of today is that it's too early for me to have results, firm results through March. So right now, I only still have 2 months worth of results that I can firmly describe, and that is that through the first 2 months of the year, we are down 0.5% below the previous first 2 months of 2021. Sales tax is up 1.2%, but use tax is down 9.7%. I do have numbers from March, and I do know that we are down again through March. I don't know what's causing that yet. I don't have any breakdown of those numbers, but that is about a 0.5%. Sorry, I'm looking and checking my notes here. I think we're 0.5% down in, or 0.5% down now, is going to move to 2.15% at the end of March. We were down close to 5%, I think, in March, unless we have adjustments that bring it up. So we're not off to a good start in the first 3 months of the year, and that's going to be a bit of a problem for us moving into this budget process, because we will need to make our sales tax projections for the budget by late July, early August. So we will have at least a couple more months of firm results by then. Maybe 5 months is usually what we're dealing with, and so we need to see some better results in the next 2 months to help this out. So yes, Costco is opening up in a couple of days, and it will certainly make a difference. We did not budget that at all for 2023, not knowing when for sure it might open. And at the time we were doing our budgeting last summer, we were not sure when that would be, and didn't think it would be a good idea to even take those revenues and try to put them into the budget process. We thought let's let it come in and see what happens at that point, because we do not know the impact of Costco and what kind of cannibalization it might cause on existing retail here in Longmont. And so, we made estimates of that, as you may remember, back a year and a half ago when we did the deal. So we have some rough estimates, but they were just based on our best guess of what might occur. So 1% of the 2% non-earmark sales tax from Costco and any other businesses that might open up on the pads on the same property would be going towards repaying the loan that was made from the fleet fund for the property and the improvements. And so only 1%, only half of the regular type of revenue that would be going to the general fund and the public improvement fund will be going to it for a number of years. So those two funds will not have the full benefit. At the other three earmarked funds, the open space, the streets, and the public safety fund will get their full share of sales tax from Costco.
So on this one, Jim and I we were talking about this earlier. This is what we're going to be watching as we head into putting the budget together. And if you've seen any of the articles that are coming out recently, I see titles like "The American Consumer Has Bad News for the U.S. Economy." And so really what they're talking about is discretionary spending is really tightening with the consumer. And so we're going to be paying some attention to this because this could be a sign of something else that's coming. We hear a lot of conversations about, are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? I think no one really knows, but nationally there's a pretty strong narrative about the consumer and their discretionary spending tightening up.
So if the sales tax, say, would continue to be down, and it being down 0.5% through the first 2 months, and potentially as high as 2.15 after 3 months, what I was trying to look at is how much of an impact could what we projected for Costco to generate. And again, it's only over 8 months this year, since we're only looking at a partial year here. How much of an impact that might make based on the estimates that we used a year and a half ago. And those estimates, although I probably threw the words conservative around a lot, they were conservative in their growth. They may be conservative in their cannibalization estimate, I hope. But the base year, the first year of sales tax from Costco was based on an estimate from Costco itself, not from Mr. Conservative guy here. So let's, I think that hopefully is, or not hopefully, but that's probably going to be realistic estimate. And hopefully it was conservative by them as well. But anyhow, the impact is that just using those projections over 8 months, it would only give us about a 0.66% increase in the general fund and the public improvement fund, and a 2% increase in the earmarked funds. So for a full year, it would have been about a 3% increase in all of the funds if they were all receiving all their sales tax. That's how much of a replacement it would be here for what we're missing. So that's not going to be a huge savior if we're sitting down 2.15%. It's going to, they need to meet a 1.7% growth just to meet their budget. And I can't, for the last 2 years, I have not had to use these type of projections and low numbers in sales and use tax. So I find it hard to say that how are we going to meet this 1.7% budget? But hopefully we have some change. So I think if you've been following what I've done and put in the reports the first 2 months, it's only been 2 months, so it's hard to get a real trend. But use tax wise, our building valuations, our permits are down, and last year was a pretty high year. And our primary employer use tax is down, and again, last year was a very high year for that source as well. And from a sales tax perspective, which I'd say we were up 1% through 2 months in sales tax, but that's about how we were doing as well for our largest generators, our groceries and our discount stores were about 1% up after 2 months. So it's it's kind of across the board, and so it's hard to point you can't just say, hey, it's because of this that we're down. Internet sales tax, which has been really been riding on that since the pandemic, and not just because of the shift in sales, but because we've been able to get more and more internet providers registered with us and now remitting to us. It's kind of leveled off. I mean, we were seeing, very high growth. I mean, 50-60% a year or something at times, and it started to level off towards the end of last year, and now it's in single-digit growth after 2 months. So that's part of it as well. We continue to sign up more of those internet sales companies as we can coax them into doing that. It's hard to require it, but we are getting them to participate. Sometimes we are able to establish nexus, and we can audit them, and we bring them in more at force than at asking them to. But most of them are agreeing to come in on their own. So the thing is, we may be capturing a lot of that activity that we weren't in the past, and now it's kind of hard to keep having that growth. So so looking ahead, what we might have in 2023, and when I was writing, and I just got this number for March, literally today, in the middle of doing all this. So, because we just closed out March, it just ended Friday. The collections ended on Friday. So projection of meeting budget in 2023 with let's say we meet that 1.71% growth, and then have 3% growth over and above that. That would generate in the general fund 1.45 million. That's M of new sales and use tax for ongoing expenses in the 24 general fund budget. So, today I'm throwing that out as a what if, and hoping that that's at least the minimum that we see, and we'll just see what happens in the next few months, and you'll get a report from me by the end of the week or the beginning of next week on how we are through what's going on after 3 months and what's causing what. And then in the 23 general fund budget, we had $5.1 million of new sales tax growth when we put together that budget. So I'm just giving you a comparison of only getting 1.45 million for 24 compared to 5.1 that we got for this year. So property tax revenue, different story here, right? So so a lot of activity over the last week or so in the news about property tax, and I was hoping that we would hear about the reassessment numbers before we sat down with you all, and I knew that we'd usually get it in early May. So again, this is a reassessment year, and what that means is the property values are being assessed as of June 30th of last year, and it was kind of a peak level of property values, at least from the real estate market at that point in time. And so there's been some pretty significant numbers, as you probably are aware, that are not just in Boulder County, but all over the Front Range. In Boulder County, we had a median residential property growth of 35% and 41% for commercial property. So I took those and just applied it to the last year's property values, and came out with a rough projection that it would be $30.1 million of property tax, which is an increase of $7.4 million over what we are projected to receive this year. That was before yesterday. So listed, and you know, I mean, we're well aware that, and I'm glad we got some information because we were well aware at that point that the legislator was going to do something, and they were waiting for the same number. So, at least able to at least give the second part of the story, but I think there's a lot more unknowns. It's really hard to deal with the information that has been made available in the last 24 hours. It's really would like to see whatever's being proposed so I could really analyze what they're really talking about versus just using the examples that were given in the media, because it's hard to understand that in general. But so a proposal being made that if the legislature passes, will then go to the voters in November for a statewide ballot question. What that would do is it would, some of the things it would do is it would drop the residential assessment ratio from 6.95 today, but it's supposed to return to 7.15 in another year. That would drop instead to 6.7. And then regarding this year's large increases, it would drop the taxable values of homes $40,000, and the average homeowner would have their increase reduced by 50%. That's a lot for me to digest in general. So all I did was take it and say, then what I projected to have growth of 7.6 million or 7.4 million is going to instead be half that amount, because that's what they're telling us, that would be 50%. Until we get more information, that's all I can come up with, and that's why the city manager threw in what's the number up here on the top of this slide. So
That's our trend these days. What's the forecast? What's the number? And if they put it on the ballot, we're going to have to budget for the lower number. And if it doesn't pass, then we'll have to deal with that. But we don't want to budget on the higher if the lower number's on the ballot. So this is going to be a interesting budget process.
Right. So, so a couple of things that leaves us with is we'll need to decide how much of the new property tax revenue to budget. Again, based on just what we've described and what the city manager mentioned, we'll see what kind of more information is available in the next few months, and we'll talk to the assessor's office as well about what they're seeing, and things do change on the local level between when those original numbers come out, and hopefully between then and the end of July, when they actually will give us another read on what Longmont's valuations are looking like. And then we're just going to have to apply what's in this bill to see what the impacts might be. And then we also need to decide then how would we use that property tax revenue? Should it be used for ongoing versus for one time? And you may recall that in our 2 years ago, we did not use all of the full growth from the property tax for ongoing expenses, thinking that the next year there is no growth. There's very little growth in our assessed valuation and the tax that would be generated, and so therefore we decided we would use some of it for one-time expenses in the first year, and then that would leave it available for new money, more or less, for ongoing in the second year. And we would probably recommend something very similar as well in the proposed budget once we have a handle on it.
So for council members that have joined us, what we were seeing as we were dealing with the budgets, reappraisal years, you had a lot of money. Non-reappraisal years, your budget was slim, and we were doing this. And so the whole point of holding was actually to smooth the budget curve out so we wouldn't be so pressed in the non-reappraisal years, which did help us as we were looking at things like salary increases. So that's what we're trying to do when we don't allocate it all immediately, is to smooth that out over the next year.
You know, what we would do is we would use it in that first year for one-time expenses, and then shift it to ongoing in year two. So that's what we'll be facing with property tax revenue. I think overall, looking at for the general fund here, the ongoing tax revenue that we might be looking to have available to us. For the 23 budget, we had $7.55 million of new ongoing revenue from sales tax and property tax for this 23 budget. As you recall, we took care of a lot in that budget, and there was a lot of growth in that budget. Now, if we used all of the property tax, the 50% of the amount that came out last week, if we used all of that for ongoing, not that we're recommending that, but I just said if we use that, and along with the sales tax of 1.45 million, so the most we would generate with these projections today would 5.1 million of new ongoing revenue for 24. And though likely I say here much less, is that we would use some of that for one time. So 7.55 for 23 is below $5 million, somewhere, I would say at least below $4 million for 24 as a start, but we'll see what happens. And unless sales tax, if things change or turn around drastically with sales tax, that makes a difference in these numbers. So in general now, then, the things that will be challenging us from an expenditure side as we're moving into the budget process, the city manager already touched on some of these. I don't know, you want to just pick it up here and?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I can take this. So obviously we know that inflation and the cost of what we need for operational expenses and capital is continuing to press us. I do project, I do think that compensation and benefits are still going to be critical as we move into this budget year for our staff. A lot of groups are moving into comp studies, and so we know there's going to be a lot of movement. If you remember when we told you funding gaps that we were seeing, we still have about $1 million of a funding gap on First and Main Transit Station. And then, what we're looking at for Vision Zero and the transportation work that we have to take moving forward. That's going to be a little bit different. So as we look at our transportation funding and what we have, we do know that they're getting the full impact on the Costco taxes, but we have to balance that with the shortfall. So we'll have to work through this as we're continuing to move forward. And then we have year 2 of the take-home car program for police department that we need to deal with. So, there's some hefty pieces in this. I think one of the things that Jim and I are talking about as we're looking at the carryover that Jim talked about earlier. So specifically, increased revenue coming in beyond projections. Most of the operational savings is actually salary and benefits, or a lot of it, just because of the vacancies that we had. As we're looking at that carryover money and some of the projects, we may have to look at that now to bridge this gap. You get the next slide. Obviously, funding for attainable and affordable housing is going to continue to be an issue, and then Nelson Flanders project is going to be an issue, although that's the water fund. So that's what we're really seeing and as potential challenges in this budget process as we start working through it. I think there's some things like holding capital and what we have that may help us a little bit. So we got a fair amount of work in this budget process, and I think it's going to start earlier for us as we're looking at it's already started with carryover and the other issues, but balancing all of these against each other as we look to the future.
Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So it was a number of slides ago, but it specifically relates to the street fund. And so my question was, I think it was 6.6 million is what I read.
I think it was slide 6. Yeah.
6.6 million uncommitted. That's the number I was looking at. And is there a reason that we'll keep it uncommitted, or would we be more aggressive in, maintenance, renovation, repairs, things like that?
I think actually you're gonna see it on the capital side, so when we talk about Kaufman Street, I'm gonna look at Jim. Jim, that's part of what we're looking at to bridge the gap for Kaufman Street. So it hasn't been budgeted for it.
Okay.
But we're holding it if you have a 4.6 million override on the cost projection, then that's part of this, the overall solution. And looking at increasing, I know they were looking at increasing, the maintenance budget as
Sure.
we're looking on street reconstruction.
Okay.
And we also had overruns on Boston Avenue Bridge. So a lot of that uncommitted, we're gonna start committing into these capital projects.
So while it says uncommitted, there's plans for
Correct.
that money. Okay. Thank you.
So, Counselor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Peck. Jim, you finished your last slide and said questions. In the council communication, there was a reference to asking council for priorities. I'm guessing you'd rather have questions than discussions about priorities right now, just given all the uncertainties you've just described.
We're here to get you direction and your input now versus, how it's frustrating for you to try to give it to us in September.
Yep.
So, yes, go tell us what you need to tell us now. And we don't, things can change between now and the time we tie this budget up. So, it's worth knowing what your priority are
Correct.
in case we have the resources to put towards them.
Well, and that's what I was gonna say. I remember one year when we started like this, and I was going to Jim at the 23rd of every month. I'd walk into your office, and then all of a sudden, it shifted on us.
I think at the point that I might have missed making is that in the general fund, while we have a very low amount of dollars compared to other budgets for ongoing expenses, we have a high amount of dollars this year in the general fund with at least $7 million to open up on one-time expenses. So, we are able to deal with some, needs, but that it's more in the one-time area than in the ongoing.
So I'm not, I've already shared my thoughts with Harold, but as I, look at our graphic and think about, the council work plan, we actually have priorities now, which I think is a good thing. It would be worth, we can have another opportunity, I know we'd have to do it soon, to talk about what would be our priorities in terms of climate action, places and amenities, et cetera, those things that we identified in the retreat, number one. And number two, I think it was in your last slide, there was a reference to Vision Zero. Because there is a question for me, which doesn't show up here, but since we're moving in that direction, and as I, think about Jim's comments and Phil's about fundamental, things are gonna fundamentally change. Like, what are those things in terms of CIP budgeting and that the staff would think, or we ought to be thinking about as fundamental changes associated with Vision Zero? How much of that's infrastructure, how much of that's other, design, pedestrian or automobile management options. I don't even know what they are. That we,
It's a lot, it's all of the above, but I think one of the things that they've briefed me on is the conversion of our signals. And Jim alluded to it in the conversation, but looking at the system that we're on now versus a system that we can move to, and one that I think gets a lot more data than what we can get now. And it's actually a cost savings to do that. So in some of those cases, they said, well, we can maybe do some of it now out of this budget. I'm like, go.
Yeah.
So there will be capital expenses, there will be personnel expenses because of the convening of the community. And that's when I said we're going to be looking at the transportation fund, and we have First and Main in these other projects.
If I think about where the first conversation, at least that I was part of, others may have been in other conversations about Vision Zero when we were in the conference room, and we got a presentation from Jim and Phil. And As I recall, Kimberly McKee was in that conversation, and there were a bunch of ideas that were shared. And at least part of the conversation went to, if you think about an index of impact, ease of implementation, and cost, right?
Right.
Some combination, you were to score these things. High impact gets a 10, low cost gets a 10, ease of impact gets a 10. Scores don't go down, the lower the impact, the more difficult, that's something like that. There were some ideas that came up during that conversation, like, oh yeah, these would be pretty high impact, not highest, but reasonably, in terms of cost estimates, and we could implement in a reasonable period of time. It would be helpful for some of that, and I can reconstruct it maybe in my head, what we were talking about or some of the examples. But in this context, going forward, in terms of priorities, we're not going to be able to do everything. There's a few things we might be able to do that are significant. And if I were to add Vision Zero, or maybe it's embedded in one of these others, a way to kind of flesh out what's the top of the list for us collectively in response to that question, for me would be useful. Maybe that's an opportunity to schedule something in a study session, or I don't know. It would just, we don't have that conversation really together, and I think it would be useful personally.
Okay. So piggybacking on that, I was going to bring that up as well. I would like in this budget for Vision Zero to be a line item rather than just incorporated into the transportation budget. And the reason for that is then we can set priorities for whatever that budget is and whether, did we meet them or did we not? Do we have enough, did we put enough into the budget to meet them? Or is it this other issue within transportation took precedence over Vision Zero? And is my thinking correct that if it is a line item, then we can, it will be budgeted? Whether you take it out of the total transportation budget and put it just in the Vision Zero bucket?
Well, I think operationally you would have line item expenses like they talked about, Vision Zero coordinator position, and that's how it would be identified. It would be embedded within the operational budget. And then you will have capital expenses associated with it that's in a different budget. So what we can do as we're presenting it is aggregate it all and say this is all Vision Zero, but I think it will be inherently in different line items based on the nature of the expense.
Okay, so it wouldn't necessarily be just in transportation, so the transportation budget, it'd be in capital improvement budget, it would be in operational budget?
I think that's what we're gonna see when they come to us in the budget and they make
Okay.
the request. I'm just saying theoretically, based on what I've seen, I'm seeing capital expenses, I'm seeing staffing expenses and what they're talking about. So
Okay.
I think we'll be more able to answer that question once budget requests are in.
Okay, I just want you to think about
Yeah.
that, doing it that way. Thank you.
And I think the point on high impact, low cost, that's a good example in the signal system where it was high impact, low cost, and saving money actually, where it's like, okay, we need to go.
Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. About Vision Zero, I think, it's kind of an adaptive methodology, even more than traffic engineering is, the kind of traffic engineering we do today, which means that I would be concerned that we build a lot of flexibility into any kind of budget because, something happens, something's built, and suddenly some signal is really failing us. We're getting a lot of complaints about left turns on Hover right now, and Hover's not likely a case for this, but you might replace a signal with a roundabout rather than a fancier signal. And, how you make those decisions is going to really affect your cost. So, I don't know what that is, where this leads other than I would be hesitant to want to see Vision Zero drawn out too much. I mean, I think the coordinator hire is a really good example of something that is easy to budget, but the investment in smart signals, not so much.
Well, I think the other thing that's inherently connected to Vision Zero is it is about working with your community and having the conversations. And so there will be things in that process that we can't anticipate. And that's one of the core principles, is that's the working group. So there is going to be some challenges in this. And this is a multi-year budget issue when we talk about Vision Zero. It's, you know, we'll budget to start, we'll learn what we need to do, then we're going to have to adjust. And then to your point, there are things that happen that we may have an intersection that meets warrants and we're seeing issues that we need to dive into. So that's all, that happens every year in the budget.
Councilor Yarbrough.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. I don't know how we can make sure that Vision Zero is in the budget, but definitely, I mean, like listening tonight about the crosswalk, we're talking about pedestrian safety. And so if nothing else, if we can determine what we can do towards Vision Zero, even if we do create, you know, make crosswalks for pedestrians and sidewalks or whatever we can do, I think that's highly important because we can, you know, we hear that often. So I think that's very important to make sure we have something in the budget towards Vision Zero, even if it's minimal, but still high up for safety impact for our pedestrians. So I wanted to say that about Vision Zero. And then number two, I don't know if we have anyone on staff that is working with for Justice 40, the federal. So that means no, nobody's saying that. Everybody looking at me like I'm crazy. But so the reason why I'm asking this, because everything that's on here, all the challenges is part of Justice 40, and it was implemented, Biden implemented that ordinance in 2021. There are several organizations who, I mean, it's billions and billions and billions of dollars. If we can look at how we can start sending our proposals, applying for these grants that implement like Vision Zero, our transit, you know, environmental issues. So there are so many indicators that's under there in Justice 40 that we should be applying for. And there is, and I can send all the information. I've been doing research on Justice 40. So I can send some of that information I've already found. And there's a funding app that shows you all the funding opportunities under Justice 40. So if we can look and see how we can implement, and a lot of cities and states are actually implementing that in their plans, in their environmental plans, in their comprehensive plans within the city. So, but the number one thing I feel that's very important is listening to the community and finding out what's important to them. And that's how most of these cities that have really amazing plans are, in my opinion, are leading with those community groups. And stakeholders are also a part of those committees and groups. So I think it's important that we look at all of this federal money that's out there, billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars, that we can see what we can get. And I mean, the first cycle has already gone, and so they've already, especially parts of transportation and climate change, charging stations, there's just so much out there that I want to make sure that we don't miss out on that. So I just wanted to bring that up, and I didn't know that we didn't know a little bit about that, and it's really kicking off. A lot of cities are already implementing their plans, and okay, somebody know about it. Here we go. All right.
Mayor Peck and Councilmember Yarborough, we do know a little bit of something about Justice 40, so I'll share with you kind of where we are in this. So Justice 40 is a policy direction from the Biden administration that's seeking to ensure that at least 40% of the federal funding that's been made available through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and through the Inflation Reduction Act goes to serve historically underserved communities. So that's been an important part of federal grant applications that we have made in the last 2 years, of which we have had, I believe, limited success, but it's out there and definitely part of the infrastructure that we're putting in place to ensure that that we know where the benefits of potential funding are going. So, for example, we are finishing up a project for a climate risk and vulnerability map that helps to identify some more impacted communities and communities that are vulnerable to particular climate hazards, and that's something that we would, a tool that we would use in targeting funding through these programs. We also, to your point of community engagement, our program with the Equitable Climate Action Team is exactly in this vein, and making sure that we're hearing from the communities that are frontline communities in climate risks. So yes, we are out there. We're hiring a new grant coordinator right now to make sure that we're responsive to those opportunities.
That's really good to know. I do want to make sure that we look at other cities who are, the way that they are implementing the 40% portion is not only just in our underserved community, but also hiring those underserved community. That's part of workforce, same thing, compensation and benefits, excuse me, which is also in that plan. So there are many ways that we can allocate that 40% of what we get. So not necessarily just within that particular community, but the community of who we hire. That could be 40%. The consultants that we use, that could be a portion of the 40%. So we have to be strategic, and I know you are. You're way more strategic than I am. But I'm just saying, I have done, and you've probably done more research, but I've just been looking at several different cities and states who are already creating these plans and how strategic they are doing it. And so I think that I don't want us to be a one-track mind, because there are several opportunities that we can look at it differently and in order for us to apply for that money, and so that we can say how we're using that 40%.
Yes, absolutely. I'd love to see what information you have, and was actually just signing up for a program on using, evidence and evaluation for specifically this purpose. So we're on the same wavelength.
So to that point, as I was reading through this, it's mainly for disadvantaged communities. However, if there is something that is municipal, citywide, it would incorporate the parts of our city that are disadvantaged. For example, the streets, transportation, housing, when you want inclusionary housing, where you have low income as well as higher income in one development or in one apartment building. So to Councilwoman Yarbrough's comments, if we can look at it that way, what can we get that would help our whole community bring, because I don't know that we have that many disadvantaged parts in our city.
Well, it's based on census tracts.
Yeah, just
Yeah.
to, yeah.
Well, and part of it too, I know when you look at some of the Army Corps programs and what they have in some of the grants, I know on the water side, we've looked at a number of them, and in many cases we don't qualify because we're just not at the same
Yes.
condition level that some of the other communities are. So they're going after grants, and they're looking at grants all the time. Many of them, I think, are connected into this from different departments. I think we're fortunate or unfortunate in some ways that our system is at a different level, and so we may not necessarily qualify for all of them. Sometimes we do. And, when you look at some of the Army Corps projects, we actually did really well in this vein early on in flood recovery, and we were having to track impact to low mod income areas as part of the dollars that we were getting in. And I think we hit most of those areas already.
Thank you, Councilwoman Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. Just to clarify what the city manager said. So you're saying that because we have equitably maintained infrastructure, in some cases, we are penalized in terms of J40 grants because our improvements are spread out appropriately now?
No, they're all the grants have different components to them. And in some cases, when you look at what's your status of your water treatment system, that's the one that comes to mind, in that there were a number of grants that we were looking at, and we just didn't qualify because our water treatment system is in such good condition.
That's what I meant.
And so, but they all have nuances to what's included in those grants, and sometimes we just don't qualify.
Is that the end of our budget process? Thank you. No, let's say, is that the end of the beginning of our budget process? Thank you very much. Can't wait to get knee-deep in this. So our next thing is our legislative update.
Mayor Peck, members of council, Sandy Cedar, Assistant City Manager. You could just rip this thing up today, I would say. We've had a lot of changes in Senate Bill 213. Yeah, the one that I sent you on Friday and printed out for you. So what has happened since the first time? So you may remember the very first time that I sent you this bill, this land use bill. It really created just tremendous preemptions. You know, just took pretty much land use planning away from municipalities and gave that responsibility to the state, which, you know, is not their role to make those decisions for our community. It's your role to do that. So originally I asked for you to oppose this bill, and you chose to oppose unless amended. And so we sent that out to our legislators, and in the Senate, what ended up happening was that they amended it tremendously, and they took out pretty much all of the exemptions, the preemptions that were in the original bill. So after Glenn and Joni had a chance to review what the amendments sort of looked like, and it's always hard to tell exactly, looked like there were still a few things that we would have to change in the land code, but for the most part, the preemptions had really been removed and put DOLA back in a really good spot of incentivizing and assisting and providing grants rather than you know, taking over the process. Okay, so to today. So I put together this legislative brief suggesting that if you would like to support the bill, it's not one that I would have brought to you for support because it still has, you know, a few things that we have to change in our land codes, but considering where we came from, if it was something that you would like to support with all of those amendments in place, then, you know, I could certainly switch that and let our legislators know that. Then today happened, and it's my understanding that if it hadn't already happened, and they may be still meeting right now, that the House was going to put back in all of the preemptions that the Senate took out. And so what will happen is if that does happen, it'll go to House Appropriations, and then it has to be reconciled with the Senate amendments in 6 days. And so, you know, my original thought was if you were interested in supporting this bill, I'd be happy to change your position, but of course all the preemptions went back in today. So I guess what I would ask for today is if you would give some leeway so that as these changes are happening, whatever the final bill looks like reflects the council's general position on this. And that's about the best I think I can do at this point.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. So in deference to Councilmember Martin's original statements about the amendments, while I voted for that, obviously, I generally have been just opposed full out to this. I think that if we want to address HOA kinds of issues, that I think that would be better done not in a sort of huge land use bill. So I'm still going to say oppose regardless. What my fellow colleagues say is a different story. So thank you.
I agree on the opposition. Is what I've heard from the governor on CPR is that he said it is a use by right bill. And I think that statement as an overall statement is frightening. So I think we should just oppose it. And Dr. Cog opposed both the original and the amendment statement. So I don't think there's much approval of this bill at all across the board.
So if you would be interested in making a motion right now, your position is opposed unless amended.
Councillor Martin.
Yeah, I actually think that my opposition has strengthened because the legislature is taking such, and the governor are taking such a chaotic approach to this. So, you know, the governor promised that whatever happens, this is coming back again for more work the following year. So we can think about it next year.
Do you want to make a motion then, Councillor Martin, to oppose?
Yeah, I'll move that we oppose for the current legislative session.
I'll second.
Okay, so Councillor Martin made opposition to 213 for this legislative session, seconded by Councillor Hidalgo Faring. Let's vote. That passes unanimously.
Thanks, Mayor. I would like to point out that what I mentioned in my brief and what you just mentioned is that this issue is going to continue to come back in some form or fashion. I mean, until we have municipalities that are, you know, that are doing the kinds of things that Longmont is doing with our land use, my guess is that these kinds of things will continue to come up, and questions around metro districts, questions around, you know, some of the caps on growth, things like that. I think as municipalities continue to do that, we will likely be in this situation in the future.
Go ahead.
And I think, we've talked about this as we've listened to testimony, we've watched it. I think as we're moving through what we're looking at for affordable and attainable housing, you know, cities are saying, we're doing it, we can do it. Here, you know, let us do it. I think as we're continuing to move forward, we need to keep an eye on this and do it if we're saying let us do it, because this does really start to feel like other pieces of legislation where it just came back year after year after year until finally something happened. And Sandy will say metro district legislation, or not, urban renewal legislation is a prime example of this. And so I think as we are in housing conversations, I think it's important for us to keep kind of what's in play in the back of our mind, because I think as cities, if it doesn't pass, we're all going to be judged on how we approach it over the next 9 months to next year and a half.
Yeah, I think that's very true.
Right, and I do think the one thing this bill did that was good was it woke everyone up. You know, we now know who has caps on growth. We now know who is, so I think that's good. We're having the discussion in many areas. Councillor Waters.
Thanks, Mayor Pack. This part of the conversation just does provoke me to reflect back on this last year, and when we did and did not have conversations with our representatives, right? There was no conversation until March, in the middle of a session. I mean, way too late to have any impact or influence at all on what they might introduce. I don't know, I was not there, I had grandpa duty that night, as I recall. So I don't even, you know, I don't know how much conversation this topic got. But it seems to me it ought to be, it's on us. And I'm not asking how anybody voted on this, but I think we will be irresponsible if we don't reach out to try to schedule an opportunity visit with our representatives, both in the Senate and the House, way in advance. You know, this session's going to be over next week. We ought to get something on the calendar in June or July to say, let's not have any confusion about what our priorities are. You need to hear those from us. And then a chance to talk about however they voted on this, what their rationale was, given they understand how our opposition. And if, you know, if as elected officials, there's something they don't know, or there's some expectation that I'm unaware of, that ought to be part of the conversation as well. We ought not to be in a situation where we're bouncing around like this and not being represented in ways that reflect what these elected officials think are the priorities for this municipality, personally.
And I do think that we had this conversation, and didn't we say perhaps in August or September would be a good time to have a meeting with our representatives?
Yes, Mayor Peck, and this meeting, you may remember, we have traditionally had the legislative dinner in January, but because of other scheduling issues, and I think we also had a weather issue at one point, we ended up, canceling and moving it to March, which is definitely way too late. June and July drafting is not completed yet, but in August it is, and so certainly, that time frame, it kind of depends whether you want to influence the drafting. And in that case, we should meet directly after the session is over, because everyone's already started again. Or if you'd like to hear a little more about what they're looking at doing, then an August timeframe is usually better, so.
After the election in November, several of them already have their bills laid out because
that's right.
they've thought about them all summer.
Yeah,
So
if you don't have it drafted by August, you're probably not making it, with the exception of this property tax bill, which we'll see any minute now. But yeah, you usually aren't gonna be able to do much if your bills are not drafted by August. So I would be happy to meet at any point in time that the council would like. Sometimes if you meet earlier, they're not totally sure what their priorities are going to be, and it's a good time to influence that ahead of time. At the same time, you don't necessarily get a lot of great information about what's actually being introduced, so.
Well, and this was an odd one too, because it wasn't introduced until March 22nd. And there was a lot of speculation as to what was actually in it, because very few people knew what was in it. And so this was
That's gonna happen.
That's gonna happen
any
anyway,
session.
yeah,
but-
this was the
was a-
governor's bill, really. It wasn't the
That's right.
legislators. And we did have those conversations with his staff through Zoom. And they didn't even know what was
Yeah,
going to
what
be on
was
the
gonna
bill.
happen.
Yeah, this one was different.
But I would be happy to change when the legislative dinner happens, because it feels like the last couple of years it's become rougher and rougher to get a hold of folks. So you tell me the month and I'm happy to set it up.
Yeah.
So I'm hearing August. I heard June, July, August. August is great. Okay, we'll
let's
set it
do-
up for August.
Yes, because we also need to talk about bills that they need to amend
Yes,
that didn't work.
yes, we did see a couple amended bills that I was like, well, that's not
Not gonna
helpful.
work. Yeah. Councilor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Peck. We assumed consensus here. I think it's much more important to influence the drafting than it is to know about the session in advance, and I would be much more interested in, like right after adjournment. And I know, it's time to start discussing it now, because several of our existing representatives have a tendency to skip town as soon as the session is over. And so if you want an early meeting that is early enough to influence the drafting, it's important to get a date set, because it might be July before they're back. And so you'd better have the date set before they leave.
Fair enough. I'm happy to set those up immediately. If August is our time frame, I'm happy to start to work on that right now.
Okay, well, we should get consensus, because I'm for June.
You're for June, okay.
Thank you. In August, they've made all their decisions. It's like us trying to budget to affect the budget in August. We're too late. So if we're gonna have a legislative dinner, we should have a legislative dinner before the budget process, or before the drafting process is finalized. It may, again, because they have vacations too, June may be difficult, but earlier than August, early July, whenever they get back, that's the time, and so time to start polling the admins, I guess. That would be my opinion on it.
Okay,
Looks
so
like we're all on board with that.
I'm hearing June or as fast as we can after the session's over. Yeah, yeah, I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
I'm gonna be gone the 22nd through the 25th of June, so not then.
Not then, gotcha. And as I mentioned last week, inappropriately, this is really my last legislative update, unless they decide to extend the session or they have a special session. So thank you so much for all the considerations this year.
And thank you for all the work you've done, Sandy. Thank you. It's very helpful. Now you get to take a little break from it. So we're at mayor and council comments. Do we have any comments from? Nope, I don't see anything from, Councilor McCoy.
Well, I didn't know. I just want to remind people that on May 6th, we're celebrating Cinco de Mayo at the Roosevelt Park, and come on down and enjoy this festive event.
And I forgot to make last meeting, I forgot to make a mention of Earth Day celebration that was at Centennial Park in the schools. There were, at last count, over 1,000 people there. And I gave out over 220 bags, tote bags, for people to get them to stop using their plastic bags. So everybody's, and it's a great way, if you haven't been there, it's a great way to network. So many people there want to talk to counselors, so think about that next year. City manager remarks.
No comments, Mayor, Council.
City attorney,
No comments, Mayor?
thank you. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn? Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. I'm not going to ask who's opposed.
Yeah.